Welcome to Propaganda Loves You, the show that asks and answers the question, who is Jerry and why is he Mandarin? I'm Kodie, your host for this week, joined by Arthur and Joe.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Hey, welcome back this week to Propaganda Loves You. This week we've got a couple topics that we're going to hit on as usual. Our main topic for today that's been making the rounds, we're going to talk a bit about the ongoing redistricting wars, I think is what people are starting to call them in the United States. So, what's initially started from Texas trying to do a mid-decade redistricting, redrawing their political maps, which then resulted in a couple Democratic states saying that they're going to do whatever they can to mitigate that. So that'll be our main topic that we're going to dive into today, look at kind of like the history of gerrymandering and political districting and, what that means and kind of like how that's played out from both sides. Because it's not like this is this current situation, you could say has been initiated by the Republican Party in Texas, but there's a history of gerrymandering on both sides of the political spectrum, depending on the state. So, we'll talk about that. And then this Thursday, we should have a deep dive dropping that's more conversational around just political parties in the United States in general and talking a little bit about like our political journey and what we thought of political parties and how that's changed over time. So that'll be kind of our main topics for today and Thursday. But before we get into all of that, check in with my co-hosts here, Arthur and Joe. How are you guys doing this week? Anything you want to talk about up front before we get into our topics for today?
Just getting over COVID. Still got a little cough, but not positive, so it's good. But, I really haven't been reading a lot this week because of it. And so I caught up a little today and excited to talk about it. But yeah, just getting over the sickness.
Yeah, sorry to hear that, man. It's tough, but good to hear you're on the mend.
Yeah, well, it's like RFK says, these mRNA vaccines, they don't really do anything. And so I don't know. What did everybody used to take? The ivermectin.
Yeah. Well, did you do the shot of bleach though?
Yeah. Definitely.
That's what
I've been
really
drinking nothing but bleach. That's probably why I'm better. Yeah.
Figured it out. Yeah, that $500 million that was going to go for mRNA research can just go to, buying bottles of bleach and handing those out. I think like that would be just the equivalent effectiveness, I guess. I don't know.
The Health and Human Services Department now sponsored by Clorox.
Oh, yeah, that's where we're headed if we're not there yet. Well, Joe, anything that you want to bring up before we get started here today?
Not a whole lot, I guess. Next week I'm going on a 10-day silent retreat, so I'm excited about that. And I was just thinking of some news topics or whatever that we've talked about in the past or that seem relevant. I live in the D.C. area, so Trump's been teasing this federal takeover of the district, of like federalizing all of the D.C. police and just sort of absolving the D.C. government and all this scary fascist stuff. So that's on my mind a little bit. And then just thinking about Gaza lately, and I think just today, this morning, Netanyahu has, afternoon their time, but morning for us in the States. Netanyahu's talking about this final plan, this final push to just take care of the whole problem and sending lots of scary signals about an escalation in force imminently in Gaza. So all that's just like a big dark cloud hanging over in the air. So really excited to go on retreat next week and pretend like the world doesn't exist for 10 days and hopefully feel a little bit better at the end of it. So that's what's going on with me.
I saw that Bernie, there was like a Bernie video where he showed the Washington Post names that were published and all the children and the names that, have been killed by Israel. And it's just really powerful. It's I don't know, just to have that concrete data is beneficial, I guess.
He brought that out in the Senate, or in Congress, or was that a separate? I thought I saw. I
Yeah,
didn't read the whole article.
it was like
a
2
big
days
stat,
ago.
right?
Yeah, 2 days ago. It seemed like he was at a podium in Senate or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where it was.
Gotcha. Yeah. And on your the district takeover, the Monday announcement or whatever is going to be coming out tomorrow. So we're recording this August 10th. I saw that the other day, and they were trying to blame that on like that one dude, Big Balls or whatever his name is, like the nickname for the guy. It's like Edward Constantine.
I do not know anything about this Big Balls
Oh,
gentleman.
seriously?
No, this is
He's a
news to
child
me.
hacker.
Yeah. So this was he was like young. I don't even know if he was 21 yet, right? Anyway, young guy that was brought in by Elon as like a senior, like GS, like 15 or something like that for Doge. Yeah, that was this guy. And so he worked for them, and then they were like, oh no, he's no longer in government. And then now apparently he's got some senior position over at the Government Services Agency. Anyway, he got mugged. Supposedly, he said that him and his girlfriend were returning to their car at like 2 a.m. or something like that, and there was like 15 kids trying to steal his car, and so he got beat up by a group of 15 kids. This is the story that's coming out. Anyway, and so they're using this as like the pretext of, oh, DC streets are unsafe and we must do all this stuff.
Yeah, which is a lie, like just a straight up lie. I was reading an article today about it from some local news organization like WTOP or one of those local stations. But even according to like DC police statistics, violent crime is down over the last year, dramatically, even like significantly lower violent crime rates this year compared to last year. So the whole pretext is just a straight up lie. But yeah, interesting story about this kid who definitely didn't get any like nepotistic favoritism or however he got that job.
He's the grandson. He's the grandson of an executed KGB agent.
That's wild.
Yeah, and at 15, it's like, hey, he's a 12-year-old. Let's get him into the government at a high-ranking position.
Yeah, I'm just checking something because I think he was also, grandkid of that person. Wasn't he the guy that was part of like insider information related to like a cybersecurity company, like he was selling or whatever?
Yeah, he got in trouble for like trade secrets or I don't know. It's like something obvious that should be a big red flag when hiring somebody for a security and cybersecurity position.
Where they're collecting and collating all of the data on U.S. citizens. Like,
yeah,
this guy can protect it.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. Anyways, yeah, I saw that too, Joe. Like, it's safer than it's been in such a long time, and that is a really that's the thing, right? The cities are unsafe and they're like just crazy democratic hellholes, and if you go there, you're in trouble. But I mean, like, that framing works. Like, I can't tell how many times like I've talked to people and been like, oh, I'm in DC, and then like, are you okay? This is like when the like George Floyd riots were going on, and we even had that other one in Baltimore previously before that. Freddie Gray, I think, was that one. And yeah, people always like, oh, you go into Baltimore? I'm like, well, yeah, you just
like the subtle racism in what people think about cities is crazy. Oh, if there's a ton of black people there, it must be dangerous. Like, it's obvious what the connection there is. And I don't know, it's weird how far the propaganda telephone game goes in history, just like how it starts in this one. I don't know, maybe I'm not making a coherent point, but just like most people would not say that it's consciously racially motivated, that they're afraid of cities. But the connection to how the propaganda has worked over time, it's absolutely a racist stereotype about cities. But just how much it can shift. And people are like, oh, no, it's just a lot of people. It's dangerous. It's got nothing to do with race. But I mean,
right.
Come on.
Yeah. Even if they're not really necessarily aware of that. But I mean, like, then there's a lot of people that are. Like, I've got a friend that lives in North Carolina. He's a cop down there. And he said, like, he was always from upstate New York. It's a very small town. But down there, it's like people won't go to Charlotte. Like, that city's too big. It's the liberal stronghold. And it's like, you live 30 minutes outside of Charlotte. You know what I mean? It's not like this is a crazy, crazy drive. But he said, like, yeah, it's a common thing. People just won't go into a city. They're afraid of it. So it's crazy. Missing out on lots of fun. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors.
Feeling that constant low-level hum of anxiety, the kind that keeps you from a good night's sleep, wondering if the world's gone completely, well, you know. That's why we've created Sleepy by Joe. It's the app that helps you find your inner tranquility in your own personal sanctuary. We've fine-tuned every aspect for maximum peace, including a bipartisan white noise generator that just plays the sound of nothing getting done. And now, with our patented shorter speeches feature, you'll be nodding off faster than an old guy at a press conference. Download Sleepy by Joe today, because it's easier to dream about a different future than to create one.
So let's go into our main topic we want to talk about today is the ongoing redistricting battles that are occurring across the U.S. now. To just do a little background for anyone that's not tracking this, what essentially was going on is the Texas legislature started looking at doing a mid-decade redistricting. So I'm going to use some generalities here, but what usually happens is you have a census every 10 years, right? Like you've got a census that figures out what the populations are, that figures out where people are located, and based off of the population figures. And an important point here is that the census isn't just counting like voters or people that vote, it's counting everybody in the United States, whether they're eligible to vote or not. So that can be kids, that can be people here under legal status that aren't necessarily citizens yet. It could also be undocumented individuals. And so that's like the point of the census, to make sure that our representation is equally distributed across where the population actually is. So you do that every 10 years. You draw your maps, your political maps based off of that. And when I say political maps, what we're talking about is just what the district is, like where representatives actually, the people that they represent. And so what Texas is looking at doing is doing a mid-decade redistricting with the express intent of picking up 5 additional seats for the Republican Party. It's not even like, oh, we're hiding this or anything like that. It's literally what they are saying they want to do with the consent and blessing and push from the Trump administration. And so as a direct result of that, you've got California, Governor Newsom, and the governor of New York State, my state, Kathy Hochul, basically coming out and saying that they will look at redistricting as well in order to kind of nullify anything that comes out of Texas. And then I think like you've got Illinois saying that they'll look at it. And then also then you have other red states. I think Missouri was one that came out and said that they would start looking at redrawing maps. So it's just starting to bubble up across basically any partisan state at this point where you have a majority in that state legislature that's able to do these sort of things, that they're all looking, not all, but it's a growing concern of different states looking at redistricting, doing partisan redistricting in order to pick up additional seats for their specific party. And so just going to talk just a little bit more here, but really shortly, like where does the term gerrymandering come from? I wanted to provide that because I didn't know this before and I thought it was interesting, but it was, just for awareness, this is coming from the Wikipedia article. It's pretty good. The word gerrymander was originally written Jerry Tackmander, Gerry Tackmander. It's, Joe, I don't know how to say this, portmanteau?
It's a portmanteau. It's a French word,
Yeah.
portmanteau.
Okay.
Just think it's just like 2 words kind of get thrown together and become a single word over time with common usage.
Perfect. Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. And it was a portmanteau of the name Jerry and the animal salamander because it was based off of a redistricted redrawing of basically the Massachusetts State Senate under their governor at the time in 1812, Governor Elbridge Gerry. So it was Jerry, and the district that they created looked like a salamander, is what people would say. They actually had like a political cartoon that was like, showed it and was like, oh, this looks like a salamander. So gerrymander, put salamander and Jerry together. That's where we come up with the name, from some political cartoons back in 1812. The easiest way, I think, if you don't really have a concept of what gerrymandering is, like we mentioned, it's trying to rework political maps in a way to give more power to whatever that party is in charge is doing that redrawing of maps. And the easiest way to understand it visually, I would just go to the Wikipedia page, because it's got like it broken down into like a pretty easy to understand visual of how you can redraw a map that has, partisan leanings and pick up additional seats for any specific party there. And then the last thing I'll say here, like before we kind of just get into the conversation, there's, like I mentioned, gerrymandering or redistricting to favor your specific party has been going on for quite a while. But when we talk about like the actual legality of gerrymandering, there's two kind of main ways to look at it, or the ways that the U.S. has looked at it legally in the past. One is partisan gerrymandering, which is like for political reasons, which is what you see going on right now. And then the other way that this had happened was gerrymandering along racial lines. And so when gerrymandering along racial lines has occurred, that actually did go up to the Supreme Court, and it was struck down as something you can't do. However, partisan gerrymandering is pretty much allowed at the federal level. There was a case in 2019, was it Ruco versus Common Cause, that basically the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that partisan gerrymandering represents a political question and it's beyond the authority of the federal court to resolve. So kind of like the Supreme Court 2019 kind of put their hands up and said, like, this isn't our thing. And so it pretty much allowed any state that was interested in pursuing this to then move ahead with partisan gerrymandering if they had like majority control of their state legislature or whatever they needed to in order to do that.
I remember reading about the Voting Rights Act, 65, the Voting Rights Act, and how they used to have to get like federal pre-clearance. And I know in like 2013, there was a Supreme Court case that struck down that the mapping didn't need federal pre-clearance anymore. It did hand the power over to Congress, and they had to kind of come up with like a new way to do it, and they haven't. And so there's like a lot of, it's very problematic. It seems very morally dark. Like it's kind of like cheating at poker, and it's like predetermining the outcome of the election. So it's like, why are you having an election? It's literally, you're just making it, the outcome is already derived. And I think we talked about it in another episode, but this could be solved by obviously a national oversight board that's not political and somehow not influenced. Okay. And then proportional voting, like star voting and ranked choice. Obviously, if you had that in a district where there's different opinions, you could have different representation. So I think that would be really great too. But the Voting Rights Act thing, where it got struck down and they now don't need like federal pre-clearance, is also a problem. And I'm usually like on the side of like, these leftists, like, yeah, California, New York, let's get them. But it's like, it just seems like everybody's just cheating and predetermining the outcomes. And like, it's a real problem for democracy. And it should be like a national issue, and we should ban this whole mid-decade. It's ridiculous. Do it after a census and have it be somehow objective. Like maybe if some Netherlands country could do the maps for us,
Sorry, it's a little dark. I'm just thinking like, yeah, we get Denmark to start drawing our maps. Like, how fast would we have some like tech companies opening headquarters in Denmark? What can we do to influence these maps in Denmark?
Yeah, you're so right. I think anything that we try to do would be corrupt. It's the problem.
I'm trying to think about how to organize my thoughts because I have a lot of thoughts about this issue. And yeah, I mean, it kind of, first of all, just what we're already hitting on is just how absurd the system is that we're supposed to trust. When things like this happen, it just reveals how silly a lot of this structure is that makes us have even a modicum of faith in the government that controls everything that does all this stuff. And I think the census really made, I'm comparing the operation of doing a census to the operation of having an election. Those are two different operations that the government does at different points in time to collect information from people. They do it in very different ways. And I think the ways that the differences in the ways they do it are very telling in what their purpose is. This may sound like a cynical take, but this is kind of my take as like a very leftist kind of anarchist perspective, and how I don't really trust governments in general to do this stuff faithfully. My view is that the elections happen, the main reason for them is for us to feel like through our participation in the election, we trust what's going on. We feel like we had a say in it. We feel like our vote was counted, our voice was heard. Therefore, it's a legitimate system. Therefore, we pay our taxes. Therefore, we go to work and do all these things like we're supposed to. The purpose of the census is to get as much legitimate information as possible from as many people as possible. Now, I feel like a legitimate election would want to get the legitimate preferences of as many people as possible who live in this district. So if you really wanted to have an election that was representative of what the people in this country prefer for their government, you would do it the same way you do a census. You would send a paid government worker to everyone's door and collect their preferences about who their representatives are. But they don't do that. They make voting very hard to do. You have to go sign up. You have to go to a poll. You don't get the day off of work. It's not a holiday. Oh, you have a felony. You can't vote anymore. Oh, your paperwork isn't in order. You moved too many times. We don't trust you, whatever. They'll find as many reasons as they can to kick people off of voter rolls. Local districts regularly purge their voter rolls in different ways. And I think last time I heard about them doing this, it was like a Republican district in North Carolina, and a lot of black people just got kicked off of the voting rolls. And so they'll find any excuse to limit the amount of information they can get when it comes to an election. But with the census, they want as much information as possible. And I think those two different methods are very telling in what the purpose of each thing is. The purpose of the election is to make us not question the system that's in place, regardless of what it happens to be. So yeah, that's kind of what's on my mind as far as the census versus the election, and sort of looking at those two operations and drawing some conclusions based on the differences.
Yeah, and I think that's like actually a great point to bring up, because Trump, one of the things that he's calling for now is he's trying to push to get a new census conducted ahead of the one scheduled for 2030. So I'm going to read off. This is an article from The Hill by Jared Gans. Hopefully I said his last name correctly there. I'm just going to read this one short paragraph, and then you can go find this and we'll link it in the show notes. But Trump said in his Truth Social post on Thursday that the census would not count those who are in the country illegally and use the results and information gained from the 2024 presidential election. The plan would likely face significant legal hurdles, as the Constitution's 14th Amendment states the census should be conducted on the basis of total number of people in each state. But just to your point, Joe, like the election is more difficult. They make it harder to get people to vote and really try to limit the number of people that can vote. And now they want to use the election results to drive the census further, like who gets to be represented in Congress. Well, it's only the people that voted, right? And didn't have all of that partisan voter suppression occurring against them. So it's interesting that you made that comparison.
That's funny. I just thought about that, like one district, that's being contested in New York or something. And like, that's just going to be redrawn as a Republican district, where they got zero votes. But the census, to this point, the census is directly tied to House seats and federal funding. And so if it's like underrepresented, obviously that's less federal dollars in those communities. And the census is already inherently biased because it's mailed to people, and it's the way that it counts, it really favors property owners, and they mail them to a house. And so renters and unhoused people and immigrants and people of marginalized communities aren't counted. I know that other immigrants are less likely to respond to the census because they fear being tracked by the government. And then the way that it counts incarcerated people is where they are in prison, not where they actually have lived. And those tend to be more rural white districts. And so white people tend to get more power from that and more representation and whatever. So it's totally fucked up. It's time to not do a new census. I don't know. Yeah, but it's totally messed up.
Yeah, and this, I don't know, I'm just connecting it historically to I remember learning about the 3/5 compromise, right? This is a direct, the history goes in a straight line from there to here. That's exactly the same kind of manipulation for cynical political reasons. And what you were saying about them getting counted, the incarcerated people in the white districts as opposed to their home districts. It's that just clicked it for me.
Yeah, and who's going to respond out of these communities that's that Trump's directly going after? Which is probably the entire point. The entire point is to not have them be represented. So they're doing their tactic really well.
There's another article that I found that was kind of interesting about this. You talked about having another country maybe draw maps or something like that, but let me share my screen really quick so you can see. So from AP, they basically have this visualization of the United States and who actually controls the redistricting in each one of those states. So you can see where like some of these states have commissions that do this that are supposed to be nonpartisan commissions, whatnot, that are doing all of the redistricting mapping. And then you've got states that are controlled by whatever political party has the power in that scenario. My point of bringing this up is for these ones that are controlled by a political party or whoever the political party is in power, we'll just use Texas as an example since that's the one that kind of kicked this off initially. But Texas, as soon as you had the Republicans really take control of the legislature, this was back in like 2002 or 2003 or something like that. It was like early 2000s when they took over. One of the first things they did in 2003 was another mid-decade redistricting, which further cemented their power and hold over the Texas state legislature. And so, like, I think since 2003, they've been controlled by the Republican Party pretty much since that time, right? And so as soon as you have a party that in the United States, I think it's fair to say that in the U.S., we don't do politics in a way that's like actually trying to help your representatives. We do politics to win, or at least, that's been the GOP's strategy for the last 40 years, right? Like, this isn't about serving people. It's about getting and building and maintaining power. And so if that's your party's mindset, as soon as you gain control of the legislature, of course you're going to do this if there's nothing that's stopping you and nothing that pushes back, right? Like, and so like that's, I mean, a huge problem, right? Like to have a political party that, again, like separate the party from United States politics, right? The Republican Party or the Democratic Party tomorrow could die. The United States government is going to continue on. There'll be some other party that comes and takes its place. But I mean, as soon as you've got one of those parties in power that now controls the levers of how you represent, they're going to take advantage of that, like it's just going to continue. And my point in bringing this up and the reason I want to talk about it was just more of like that topic that I just mentioned there. Like if you're no longer playing to represent people, you're just playing to win. Like, does this map right now that looks, some split, some commissions run this and a few places have Democratic control, like, does it just continue to turn red and blue? Like, is that what happens? Like after a while, like, more and more states, like with this battle going back and forth, just try to go to the point where they're just going to control. And then you have a literally red and blue split map, like for who's represented in each of those states. Because that's like the natural conclusion of that, right? You only have states that represent GOP policy, and then you have states that represent like a Democratic policy if you gerrymander them to the fullest extent, right? It's kind of where my head's going.
Yeah, it seems more and more like, I don't know, I don't want to get like negative, but it just kind of seems like as we've continued all of these talks on the political status and all of the laws that we're uncovering that have changed to create this political ecosystem, that it's just very much that the United States has decayed in terms of laws. And instead of fixing things, we're just kind of patching things and layering. Like we're arguing about antiquated laws from the 1800s that could apply to us and how they should be applied. And I don't know, it's just like the whole Thomas Jefferson thing of the earth belongs to the living and we should rewrite the Constitution every 18, 19 years, whatever. Let's give the power over to the next generation and just literally gut it and rewrite it all. This is obviously so corrupted.
Yeah, I think the more we see about this stuff, it erodes any trust that people could reasonably have in the system. And then you start running down a list of alternatives of thinking about different ways to do it. I think I've mentioned a constitutional Congress, like just having a constitutional convention, right? That's one, if you want to work within the system that already exists to reform it in a way that's has some longevity and could produce some meaningfully good political results, a constitutional convention of just like revising and rewriting and reconsidering the framework of our government completely. It's necessary because no one really trusts it anymore. No one really trusts this process. If they do, they trust not the entirety of the system itself, but the Republican Party specifically or the Democratic Party specifically. And so you're really living kind of, to your point, Kodie, at that point, you have two co-governments operating laterally and just competing with each other. And it's not really one system. And that's just like a precondition for civil war, basically. Like, That's where it's headed.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we want to work within this system, I think at the very least a constitutional convention that reconsiders all of this stuff from the ground up is necessary. But yeah, it's important to I don't know. I try to think about the different levels of like we're just some guys with a podcast, None of us are Congress people. None of us are doing any of this redistricting or pulling the levers of power in any meaningful way in the system. And I think sometimes it's easy to have hypothetical conversations about what we should do as if we have some control over what's going on at all, from the average person's point of view, from the people level perspective. I think another thing we mentioned on this podcast is the 3.5% idea that if 3.5% of a population are adamantly and publicly opposed to something, then meaningful change will happen. That's sort of like the revolutionary threshold rule statistically. And I think in the U.S. that number is around 11 million people. So you need to mobilize 11 million people to be in the streets protesting and yelling about stuff. And there's a group, I know they're on Instagram and they're probably on other platforms as well, but it's just called General Strike US. And they're trying to get people to sign petitions saying that when that threshold is reached, we'll all strike and demand a change and everything. So if you're on social media, look up General Strike US and give their page a perusing to see if it's interesting to you or not. But that's a meaningful thing that average people can do, really. The way that the average citizenry flexes their collective muscles is a general strike. That's the peaceful option, really, is a general strike. If that doesn't work, it turns into a revolution. So I think those are the meaningful things that will happen from the average citizen point of view.
And I was thinking, Joe, as you were kind of talking through that, we talk about 3.5% in the United States, but maybe I wonder if it'd be more effective or as effective if you look at it like your state, just using we'll keep using Texas as an example for a second, right? The 11 million people for the entire United States, what does that turn into? 3.5% just focused on Texas, changing the redistricting to a commission. Very specific goal in mind, right? The large things that we talk about, changing the direction of the United States, it's very hard when it's a general goal. But if there was a movement just focused on your state in Texas needs to move to a nonpartisan, again, as nonpartisan as you can make it somehow, commission for redrawing based off of the census or something like that. I feel like that might be an issue that's easier to organize around and less divisive or less likely to get, I guess, broken up by other issues. Does that make sense? Just having a single goal in mind for the Democrats of that state or other states that have party-controlled redistricting.
It's a little over 1 million people in Texas at 3.5%.
1 million people in Texas. So I think we've got at least one person, or at least maybe two, that listen from Texas on a routine basis.
We're almost there.
Yeah.
Oh, that social media page I mentioned, General Strike US, they have state-level sub-chapters and sub-pages. So you can sign up for the national General Strike page and sign their petition, and your state also probably has their own individual social media account. So General Strike Texas or General Strike New York or whatever.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and then I was also thinking too, maybe to get more complicated, I guess, Arthur, you were talking about all the different things that go into play there with prison populations being counted or something like that. I mean, I'm sure you could build an entire list off of just this issue of here's all the things we need to do to fix this. Please stay tuned for a word from our sponsors.
In a complex world, shouldn't democracy be simple? Are you tired of districts that just make sense? The Liberty Institute is proud to produce our new democracy optimization program.
How am I supposed to feel represented when my neighborhood is just a neighborhood?
That's where we come in. Our proprietary algorithm uses a state-of-the-art predictive model to create districts that are not just balanced, but strategically unbreakable. We turn chaos into clarity.
We've heard your frustration. Gone are the days of boring, geographically sound districts. We'll connect a seamless and efficient political community with a clear voting mandate.
So my new representative lives 30 miles away, but we're in the same district because there's a single traffic circle that connects our two towns?
Exactly. That's the beauty of strategic representation. It's about finding the fastest and most direct path to a perfectly predictable outcome.
Don't settle for the tyranny of the majority. Demand democracy optimized. Your vote simplified.
So the one thing that I wanted to bring up about the Newsom's plan, or what he's been basically talking about, so essentially, California has a commission, right, that does all their redistricting. So Newsom doesn't have the power to go ahead and just like automatically push this through. This has to go through a vote. And I think this is one that has to be like voted like in a special election, like citizen level ballot voting here. So the citizens of California would have to approve like what the plan is that is being put forward. And essentially the plan is to put the commission, well, I might be getting the details a little bit wrong here, but the gist of it is that the maps that they put in place recently, like they wouldn't take these out permanently. Like the change would essentially be only enacted if Texas went through with their redistricting, and it would only be for the 2026 and 2028 elections is kind of how they're saying this. So it's essentially that the way he's selling it is like it's only to nullify whatever Texas is doing, and if they don't do it, then we're not going to do it. So I was curious about your thoughts on that, right? Like, what do you think about that approach to when we talk about like fair representation? Arthur, you brought this up earlier, like if this just continues, right? We're not representing our state, but I guess that's what I want to consider, right? Like this approach of trying to do this, you might not have the representation in the state, but at the same time, you're trying to nullify across the U.S. not having the right representation. That's essentially why. So I guess, does that make sense, the questions I'm asking based off of
definitely.
the approach that he's using there?
Yeah, it brings me back to like the cheating at poker analogy. It's like, somebody's like having an ace up the sleeve and the other person's like, well, if you do it, I'm just going to do it. And it might be like a necessary counterpunch to avoid, losing the national level of like seats and representation and stuff. The whole thing just undermines, representation, and like it literally is just predetermining the outcome. So it's like, how is that not problematic?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's Texas starting it, I guess.
They started it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I agree completely. I think, first of all, just the more that the back and forth drama happens between the political parties out in public for everyone to see, the less people are going to trust the system overall. So that's one negative to all of it. It's all eroding trust in the system across the board. But as a like temporary short-term strategy, all this redistricting we're talking about going on at the state level, the purpose of it is to manipulate the tally of seats in U.S. Congress, in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Some people are surprisingly confused about what Congress is versus the executive branch versus the judiciary. And just, I don't want to sound like condescending or anything, but Congress includes the House of Representatives and the Senate. Both of those bodies are part of Congress. Sometimes people think the Senate is something else and Congress is separate from that, but no, it's all Congress. It's just the House of Lords and the House of Representatives, like we said in other episodes. But yeah, the redistricting stuff, the gerrymandering, that's really for the House of Representatives specifically, though, right? That doesn't affect Senate because Senate seats are statewide. There aren't any districts other than the state boundaries for the Senate. So all of this gerrymandering going on is to manipulate the seat tally in the House of Representatives specifically. So the question is, what work does the House of Representatives do? What resources in the federal level does the House of Representatives have influence over and control over? And what are the consequences in that balance of power between the Democrats and Republicans? That's what the consequences are for all of this. And I think Republicans are going to be, just on a domestic policy level, doing a lot more draconian things that are anti-women, anti-trans, anti-black across the board, more so than the Democrats are in general. And that's going to be an immediate consequence that average people suffer from. Yeah, you can go back to the Planned Parenthood stuff going on as an example of that. But that is one immediate consequence of allowing Republican districts to manipulate their stuff. And if you're thinking from the perspective of the Democratic Party, yeah, you got to do something to try to balance that out in the short term, at least. So, yeah.
Yeah. You said something there, Joe, that's really important. Like, what does Congress do? Like, traditionally, Congress is the one that appropriates funds, right? They're the ones that they're like in charge of like actually, sending funds out and approving that. But they've pretty much abandoned that role, at least in this administration, right? They're allowing the executive branch to determine, what funds are going where and whatnot. So I think like, yeah, that's a huge part of it, right? Like they're just trying to maintain that monopoly over all of our branches of government. And if Democrats get control of the House, then they would likely take back control of the person, or try to, right? Like, and it would slow down the administration's current objectives for sure.
Heaven forbid that the money go to like Medicaid instead of retrofitting a private jet given to Trump from Qatar that he's going to use after the election.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Or just to pay, whatever tax breaks we've said that we're going to do for the billionaire class here. So,
or how many 130 million to ICE or whatever it was. That's part of it. Billion. I apologize. Jesus. I always forget just how big a billion is compared to a million. It's 1,000 millions. Like most people want to be a millionaire. Do that 1,000 times and you have 1 billion.
Yeah.
They said 130 billion to ICE. That's crazy. That's a wild number.
My dad likes to he's progressive leftist, okay, where maybe I've inherited some of my values. He likes to not even say million or billion or anything. He likes to be like, oh, it's 100,000, 100 million, 100. Like he likes to break it down to like, it's 1,000 million, it's that, whatever. And then it just seems so grotesque. Like break it down into more simplified terms and you get at the point of how gross it is.
Yeah. Crazy.
And 500,000 people are still unhoused, and a lot of people are going hungry, inadequate nutrition, inadequate housing, water infrastructure falling apart, bridges falling over. Like you can run down the list of ways that they are neglecting to take care of people's basic needs, but they're making sure that all the punitive institutions, all the tax breaks for their buddies, all of that stuff is taken care of.
That's funny. Like there's that common refrain of like that I think Charlie Kirk was the one that was saying this the other day, but I've heard it from others, but it was basically like you reward good behavior and you punish bad behavior. It's like a cornerstone, like conservative thought, right? Where's the reward for people that are doing the right thing and working hard? It's just like, no. Let's flip that. It's punish bad behavior and don't punish good behavior. It's really and good behavior in their mind is, probably a very different list of things than, there's.
Hey, the other thing, I don't want to like get off topic, but it's, kind of connected, is that, with this whole Texas Democrats, so like Texas proposed this initiative and I think some Democratic lawmakers fled the state. And now it's like, in the news cycle, everyone's like, oh, let's go arrest them and, line them up in front of a firing wall. But in like, in Oregon in 2021, we had this exact same thing happen where Republicans in the state legislature walked out multiple times. And it happened again in 2023, and it was to block all these Democratic bills. And we couldn't do anything. Literally, there's no laws in Oregon to do this. We had to then later vote on a measure which if somebody misses 10 absences from the state legislature, they can't be up for re-election, which already is like, well, they can still do it then. And now it's like, go hunt them down. And it's like watching some Arnold movie. It's ridiculous that's the threat versus like what actually is happening in these progressive states. It's a total double standard.
And they've gone to what, Illinois, New York, like basically to the Democratic strongholds, like where you've got the governors that they're speaking out more, right? And then Pritzker was like, yeah, the FBI can come, they can see him, can't arrest him. There's no law there. What are you gonna do? Yeah, it's really, really strange. And I want to hit the point though, because like I think what people would say is like, oh, these people are running away from doing their job, and like we elected this government And so this government should be representative of us, and now people are running away, so the government that we elected can't do its job. And so it can seem like a perversion of what you've elected people to do, or it can be twisted that way, right? Like, oh, these people aren't allowing the will of the people to go through by doing this. But the thing is, they're literally trying to make sure that the will of the people is equally heard, right? That's why they're leaving the state here, so that you don't have this Texas-controlled legislature that basically makes it impossible for Democrats to win. That is subverting the will of the people by putting policies in place that make it so that you can't be represented in your own state, right? I guess so. Like, what I'm trying to say is they attack it as this thing like, oh, people aren't being represented because they're not doing their job. But it's like, that's literally their job. In my mind, they are doing their job by trying to make sure that there's more fair representation. And that would go either way in my mind. Like, if you're really trying to, strip that power.
Yeah, it's like, I used to, like, I was the youngest growing up, and my family would want to play Monopoly, and my brother's the banker, and my dad is like, he somehow gets dealt Boardwalk and Park Place, and my other brother has like secret, money under the table, and I'm the only innocent one there. And it's like, let's play Monopoly. No, they're literally just not allowing the stuffed measure to like be forced down their throat. Like it is just representing the actual people. It's all PR, I think, this whole argument.
Yeah. Right up until it's not.
I think Elon's child should get like a crayon with a map of the United States and just start making shapes. I mean, that's probably what's going to happen.
Like the British in the Middle East, just drawing it up.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening and hanging out with us.
If you enjoy the show, help us spread the word. Leave a rating or review and share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think would get something out of these conversations.
Your ratings, reviews, and shares help this show grow, and the more people listening, the harder it is for propaganda to win.
So until next time,
stay aware, stay safe, and remember,
propaganda loves you.